Jordan River, it's an honor to talk to you.
Mark, thank you so much for having me.
So I'm such a huge fan of your channel, Spirit Science, and it's been a huge part of my awakening.
Mm, wow. Well, thank you. I really appreciated a lot of your content as well. I remember checking it out in the early days and just seeing the amount of effort that you put into all the drawings and the whole whiteboard thing. It's fantastic. It's a really good system and model that you have.
Thank you. Same to you. And I feel like we're fairly similar. We're both in that spiritual world. We like to touch on philosophy, and we're both like kind of the animators behind the scenes, and we're like the voice and the script writer. So we're kind of like Swiss Army knives.
Definitely. I remember, yeah, as far as like cross-going content goes, I remember maybe it was a few years ago, or I'm not sure when, but you did an episode on the flower of life. And I was like, this is incredibly familiar.
Guilty as charged. I mean, that video you did on the flower of life was a huge part of my awakening into just once I've discovered sacred geometry, it kind of put a lot of the pieces together for me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, from ancient civilizations to consciousness to symbolism to everything. It's like comes back to geometry.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I think you recommended to get that book, The Ancient Secret of the Flower of Life. Read that one, and you know that also was another gateway.
Yeah.
So yeah, thanks for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. No, it's one of my favorites, and I still recommend it to people who are just getting started. They're like, what book should I read? I'm like, always begin here. At least for me, that was one of the ones that really, really did it. Drunvalo just put everything together in such a profound and powerful way. And the moment I read through it and studied that whole book, I just knew that I wanted to, just share it, just translate it, I guess, into a medium that more people could be familiar with or could learn about, because it's just such amazing material.
Yeah, it's one of those books that every now and then you just crack it open to a random page and it just hits you. You're like, oh, I needed to return to this. Or I think it's definitely time for me to dig that out of my closet and look at it again.
100%. Yeah. There's always something new to find in that book.
So, yeah, for anybody that doesn't know who you are the creator behind Spirit Science, which is like one of the OG channels of YouTube. And I think it's responsible for helping millions of people just revisit spirituality and just dig deeper. So thanks for that.
So thanks for that.
Yeah.
You're welcome. I guess, it was like a perfect synchronicity and arrangement of different ingredients, I guess, in my life and how Spirit Science came about, because, I've been making cartoons since I was a kid, since I was like 12 years old. I just love animation. I've been telling stories, published my first video when I was 13. And then I had a spiritual awakening at 19 and was barely on YouTube at the time because I grew up publishing on Newgrounds. And then all of a sudden, it was like the spiritual awakening fused with my love of animation, and Spirit Science just happened. And I was just going to do 12 episodes, and just finish the human history movie and be like, that was great. I had lots of fun. Go do something else. And it became so popular and so many people were enjoying that content and asking for more. It kind of just took over and became my life. And I've been focusing on Spirit Science for the last 14 years.
14 years. Yeah, you really are the OG of YouTube. I've been on for almost 10 years. And I think your channel was one of the big ones that inspired me to like put my stuff out there.
Cool. Yeah, that's really cool. We're actually right now I've been working on I guess it's like a mechanism, a support channel and group for people, and some like training materials for people to break out of the mundane and do that too, to just like to make content, because there's so many different ways of making content and everyone's expression would be unique. And a lot of people are called to tell a story or put themselves out there, but there's a lot of hurdles on how to get past it. What app do you use? What software is what medium? How, what's it going to look like? And kudos to you for, and all of the other creators out there too, who just said, I'm just going to figure it out and do it. And it's really exciting to see how many different people have taken their inspiration and brought it into the world. That it's like art can change the world is an idea that I've heard for a long time, and I fully believe that. Like, when we bring what is within us out, that has such a rippling effect on the collective consciousness, and it moves everything forward.
Absolutely. I think a lot of people's flame, their creative spark, is getting a little extinguished by AI right now. I hear a lot of people saying, "Oh, what's the point? Why would I even make this painting if AI can do it in 5 seconds?"
Right.
And I'm curious to get your opinion on like, what do you think the importance of creativity is?
Yeah. Well, even as far as the AI goes, the AI can be used as a tool to direct your creativity in a particular way. But yeah, there's so many different ways of how to bring that expression into the world. But if we look at thousands of years of history, I mean, the earliest form of expression that we know of is art. Cave paintings on the side of or like carvings on the side of walls, of like ancient caves or whatever, and then like pottery and different both useful resources or useful things for humanity, but also they often are imbued with stylistic expression of expressing the culture or the energy of what people were going through or experiencing, or their love at the time, and putting their craftsmanship into the material world. So this is the whole thing. Like, from a spiritual perspective, it says that and basically every spiritual tradition, or most of them around the world, say that it's that formless, infinite, perfect, supreme spirit manifested itself from the limitless light, from this this infinite field that is intangible, and it descended through density, slowly condensing into more and more firm material substance, like the whole wave particle duality and the light and matter E equals mc squared paradox is that all matter is just light, but it's condensed into a very, very dense form that can take material form. So the nature of artistic expression and the value of it is that you're in the same way, in the like fashion to that creative spirit that is imbued in everything and everyone. When we take that inspiration from within us, that idea, that feeling, that intangible knowing, or whatever it is, that creative drive, and we imbue it into the material, we are translating in that same creative process, taking something invisible, taking something mystical or meaningful to us, and putting it into a tangible form that can be expressed to other people. Because, like, words are one of the first forms of that translation, but it's audible, but it's not physically, visibly tangible. And so, the next stage, I guess, would be writing in the word and the language sharing process, and then if you write a book, you can translate those ideas into a story that can be meaningful to someone. And then now we have so many different ways of expression, whether it's sculpting or painting or the digital, all of the different ways of creating digitally, and all of those are available to us. And when we do that, we become closer to ourselves, because we're actively bringing through that creative energy, moving it through us and bringing it into the world and sharing it with other people in order to further expand, the human imagination and the scope of what's possible. And we see that all the time in so many different expressions. Like, it's because of artistic expression that changes people's collective thinking about an idea, about a subject, whatever it is. And the next thing you know, our technology, or the advances that we make as a species, and the evolution of our consciousness goes to reflect the creative changes or the creative inspiration that took place because everybody saw that art or that expression.
That's brilliant. You're reminding me of one of my favorite quotes from Bruce Lipton. I know we're both fans of him.
Love him.
He talks about how heaven is a creative place because everybody's version of heaven is different. Like, your version of heaven is maybe your family on a picnic bench on a sunny day, and mine is me and my family on a beach. And it's just like, we all have our own vision of heaven in our mind. Mm-hmm. And so therefore heaven is a creative place. Mm-hmm. And so then Bruce Lipton says, well, consider this. What if we were born into heaven? Mm-hmm. And we came here to create. And when we're creating it right, heaven on earth is here. Mm-hmm. But if we're creating it wrong, hell on earth is here. So it's like you are the author of your destiny. You are the artist. you
Yeah.
can create whatever you want.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting too because I really am a massive fan of Paramahansa Yogananda and follow his work very avidly. And I spent the last couple of years reading like basically everything that he ever published or his team published. And he describes these different dimensions of how reality comes into being. And he says that the first level of existence is the causal realm, and it's a realm of pure consciousness and thoughts, and it's pure energy and it's formless. And then the next down from that is the astral. And in the astral, it's part material, but more astral, or more energy rather, where your thoughts actively shape reality instantly, but it has some level of form and substance. And all of the mythical creatures that can't exist here in this dimension are actually there. So like the fairies and the sprites and the dragons and all of these creatures are all in the astral, and the goblins and the trolls as well. And that there's like good parts of the astral and there's bad parts of the astral. And then it manifests one level deeper, and we have the material dimension where everything is really heavy and slow and dense. But in every dimension, they all work the same way, is that thoughts are steered by consciousness, just as you said, and you are the creator in every single one of them, wherever it is that you're manifested. The challenge is that in this dimension, it's very, very slow, but you still have that creative power. It's just that now collectively humanity often gets stuck in, especially, we've passed through the Kali Yuga and this very dense state of being, a disconnected state of being. So there's been a lot of pain and suffering, and that's what people are conditioned to. And so that's what we've collectively created. But creating heaven on earth is an internal process first. And so then when you go to heaven, or you die and you go to the astral, or if that's the pathway in the process, then it's still the same thing. You're still creating actively. It's just that you have such a higher access to the creative ability because it's basically instant, rather than, you're wanting to create something here in this life and it's going to take some years and some effort and some belief to really get there. But it still works the same. The principle is the same no matter where it is that you exist. So yeah, I fully agree with what you said, and Bruce Lipton's wisdom.
Yeah. So how's it going in your creative process? Do you still have that fire 14 years after doing spirit science? Is it still there?
It's interesting. It's yes and no, but it's fully a yes, but it's that some things are changing, because just doing spirit science and Patchman for so long, I've been through some very interesting struggles also that actually kind of weave into the story, I guess, that I would speak to you too. But in the last maybe 4 years or so, things started to slow down. I actually, in 2020 and 2021, I had a really big team that I was working with, and we were cranking out 3 new spirit science videos every week. And it was really, really fun. And it was starting to be this like leveling up in my journey with spirit science. But some things happened, and one of the worst things was my mystery school that we had created was hacked, and everything kind of got shut down, and I had to let go of a lot of my staff, and I went into low power mode. And this was a part of this early transition where I did some soul searching and was like, do I want to just rebuild everything again from scratch and Patchman just keep going and keep doing the same thing? And it was at the start of last year, the very beginning of 2024, when it was almost like I got this message from my higher self. It's time to do Elixir. If you don't do it now, it's going to be years and years and years before you actually do this dream project of yours. And I started feeling into that and being like, yeah, no, that's the thing that's going to light me up, and I still want to do spirit science, and I still want to see Patchman rolling out, but I don't want to be the one drawing and animating that the whole time. I want to be doing this other project. And Elixir is a story. It started called Exile, but it was a story that I started writing when I was 14 and 15 years old. And so it's a precursor to spirit science by like 7 years, or not quite that, maybe 5. And this is a mythical animated story that is very much on the same level as Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, Aragon, these Avatar, The Last Airbender. It's a really epic adventure fantasy story that's also very relative to us on a spiritual level. But I started writing this as a kid, and between the ages of 15 and 19, I published 4 episodes. It took me a year to make one episode, and each episode was about 8 to 10 minutes long. So I published these, and then at 19, I had my spiritual awakening and spirit science began, and I just put that whole project on the shelf. And at the beginning of last year, I just knew, I was like, this is the time. I have to start working on this. And I started putting my full focus into starting some scripts and like opening up Adobe Animate and drawing some of the scenes of what the next episode would be and how it would look and how it would feel. And for the past 2 years, I've been slowly being able to put more and more time into it. Because spirit science was still happening, and we had different. I did restart I called it the Spiritverse Academy, but that was the next generation of the mystery school that we had. And so there were a lot of different things that I was doing, but then I would have like a full weekend once in a while, or a full week once in a while, where I could animate and work on Elixir and write the story. And over the past 2 years, I've written 6 seasons with about 60 episodes and about 500 pages of material, including another 250 pages of world building doc about the backstory of the world, and just filling out the entirety of the story and collaborating with my team to say, like, how are we going to do this, and where can we use AI to speed up the process, and what is the workload for the animation. And it just lights me up thinking about it. I have been pouring myself into this and more this year. And right now we've got season 1 like well underway. We've got 10 episodes ready. Well, not quite like ready for publishing, but almost every episode has some level of percentage done, between 10 and 70% complete. And we're looking at a probably early 2026, like January 2026 launch, maybe December if things speed up and depending on the pipeline and the process. But that's where my creativity and my inspiration and enthusiasm is going. And it's not just the animated series, because I see this being an entirely new thing from Spirit Science, even though we're going to publish it on the Spirit Science channel to start. I want to see a novel written that expands on the story following the same plot, as well as a graphic novel, 2 video games, a Netflix adaptation one day, and hopefully a live action movie series one day as well. And this is the next phase of where I'm going into. And every time I think about it, and the thought of I can spend the whole day working on this today, yes, I'm so excited. It's really, really, really fun.
Oh, I love that. I love hearing the artistic inspiration there, because it inspires me as well. But I remember there's a video that was quite sad that you put out about how spirit science has changed, and most of your time was spent managing things and doing business work and busy work. And I that deeply resonated, because I think it's natural as a content creator or an artist, you get bigger, and then you get an employee, and then you get 2 employees, and then you end up dealing with things that aren't really your passion or creative.
Yeah.
And because you turn into a business, the hobby turns into a business.
Yeah.
And it's exciting to see you like invigorated about this project. It's very inspiring.
Definitely. Well, it's funny because, or it's interesting, like there's when I went through my several years of intense business training, because there was a certain point where things shifted, and I thought, no, I have to learn how to run a business properly. In most businesses, you've got, at the very heart of the whole thing, you've got a visionary and an integrator. This comes from Gino Wickman, I believe it was Rocket Fuel, a book that he wrote. And the concept is, you've got the visionary is the one who like sees the big picture vision, knows where the ship is going, loves doing the creative stuff, and that's what they spend their time doing. And then you've got the integrator, who is on the ground, grounding in the vision, making sure the websites are connected and the autoresponder and the email sequences and the, everything, the offers, the marketing, the selling, and all of these things are integrated, and usually there's a stage where the visionary has to let go of some controls for the integrator. And I went through a phase like that where I did bring on an integrator and we worked very well together, but I still felt like I had to be a business manager as well in that process. And then when we went through the big calamity of whenever it was, and the hacking, and I was letting go of people, and some struggles that took place, or all of that stuff, I found myself back in that position where I was doing everything, and I had pretty much a business that required 10 or 15 people to run, and it was me and maybe one other person doing all of it, and it was just way too much, and it definitely got the better of me. And that was where I went into low power mode and did some soul searching and just went, no, I like to draw, but I don't love selling things, and as like, I really, really love my business mentor. I took a lot of courses and training from Dan Lok. He's amazing. And for anyone listening who wants to learn business stuff and money mindset stuff, Dan Lok he's the man. He's amazing. And he but at the same time, a lot of his training and experience was based on his training and experience. And my expertise and my focus and my passion was still in a different track. Making a fully animated 2D cartoon story series and the novel and all of this, there's crossover, but the running of the business, it's just it's for a different mindset. There's people who excel at it, and that's what they love and that's what they want to do. But yeah, it's definitely good not to, just to be very clear on what it is that you want to do and what you want to learn. And for anybody who's in a similar track, I think even for me, it was really good that I learned the business stuff. But then it was also good for me to go through that and go, but where I really shine is in the storytelling. I'm a storyteller. I'm an artist. I'm a creative. That's where I want to live.
Yeah, it's funny. The landscape of YouTube has changed quite a bit since you began. It seemed like 14 years ago, every creator on YouTube was kind of like doing a hobby and then sharing that hobby with the world.
Yeah.
And then once they got to a certain size, it was a pivot to, okay, we've got this audience. What can we sell to them? How can we turn this into a real career? Whereas a lot of the later generations of channels came into it very much with the business focus from the beginning, or even they had the product to sell, and then they're like, how can we create a channel around selling these shoes or these art materials? So yeah, that's one thing I've struggled with myself, is I just don't really have much to sell. Mm-hmm. And another thing that's a little bit at odds in the spiritual community is like, even the idea of selling to people, it does seem to be a bit contradictory to a lot of the spiritual ideas about just like, give it out for free. Don't use people as a means to an end. It feels a little slimy when a spiritual person is selling things too much, Yeah.
Yeah. That was always one of the biggest complaints that I got from people when we, I went 10 years or close, maybe 9 or 10 years without making any offering at all. And even at the very beginning, I said to myself, I didn't make Spirit Science to make money. I don't want to make money. I didn't even turn ads on YouTube for 4 years. And I created a lot of debt for myself doing that. I put myself in a really rough position for a while because I was like, I'm going to endlessly create this content and I'm going to receive nothing for it, and occasionally people would send donations and I would go, I will allow that, because I'm in financial trouble, but otherwise I'm not going to sell anything. I'm not going to advertise. I'm not going to, and then even later, my first big product was Patch Tarot, this Spirit Science tarot deck that I made. And I spent a year, maybe a year and a half, drawing all of the cards with crazy detail, and wrote a 500-page full-color textbook. And it's like massive. This is like massive textbook, all about tarot and the mystical nature of the cards and the alchemy and the astrology and everything. And when we put them for sale, there were still people complaining, saying, how dare you charge for these tarot cards that you made? And I was like, we have to print them. It's going to cost money. It's going to cost maybe tens of thousands of dollars to print a giant bulk of these cards to be able to send them to you. What do you mean? What do you mean don't charge? And then that never really stopped when later when we launched our mystery school and this thing, there were people who were really frustrated about it. And that's actually the reason why I made the Spirit Science Money series. We have like a 7 or 9 part money series and then a money movie, which was also a lot based on the material I was learning from Dan Lok. But it was very much like, hey, there's an interconnection between the spiritual realm and the material realm, but also we have to get the foundation. Your foundation has to be solid in order to rise up. The tree can't grow to 100 feet if the roots are this, are 2 inches deep. So part of the rooting in the world involves acknowledging that money is energy and can be spiritual. Maybe most people, or a lot of people and a lot of businesses, are made on unspiritual things. But, even as Yeshua said, give to Caesar what is Caesar's and give to God what is God, or what is God's. That doesn't mean don't give Caesar anything. That doesn't mean don't pay your taxes or don't have anything to do with money. You can do that if you want to, in which case enjoy living in a cave meditating for the rest of your life. And I don't say that sarcastically. Like, that's a beautiful and transcendent pathway if someone wants to go that way, right? Or live in the woods in a shack that they built themselves and they hunt and they take care of themselves. You can do that. But if you want to live in the world with a phone and a laptop and being online, there's a natural economic flow of resources that is always happening in that world. And that doesn't mean that you can't also have a connection with the spirit. And that doesn't mean that you can't interrelate them. Just be clear what you're doing. If you're charging for something, make it be a valuable reflection of the effort and the energy and the intention behind whatever it is, and yeah, don't mix up the two improperly, but you can have a spiritual business also at the same time in order to better serve people. Because I know for myself, if I had $20 million today, I'd probably be spending my time building a giant spirit center healing community for people to come and do yoga and maybe some kind of like plant medicine ceremonies and healing retreats and silent retreats. And, it would be like a healing center. Maybe there's a juice bar and people could come there and do a week-long fast, or they could do the Gerson therapy, and they could like have transcendental healing experiences. That's what I would do with resources, at least on that scale. And that's the thing, is it really all comes down to intention. What are you using it for, and why are you doing the work that you're doing, and with how are you making the money, and then what are you using it for? It's about that transmutative process.
Yeah, finding the balance of not using people, but also it's like, hey, I gotta survive. It's like this, I don't know, it's a fine balance. And of course you're gonna turn some people off, and there's also gonna be other people that are like, wow, I would have paid 3 times as much for this.
Mm-hmm.
It's finding that balance. And it's, I see some parts of spirituality where like these conferences or festivals or retreats, they're incredibly expensive, and it makes it seem like some of this new age spirituality stuff is almost like accessible only to these like elite, wealthy, rich people. I mean, Burning Man, the average salary at Burning Man was like $1 million or something.
Wow.
I saw a stat like that. And, you look at a place like these ayahuasca retreats in Costa Rica, where they're like 5-star resorts. And it's, they're marketed as this is what you have to pay to reach enlightenment. But it's kind of, I don't know. How do you feel about these spiritual retreats and things charging enormous amounts of money?
You know what? I can say without a doubt that, so what comes to mind when you talk about the premium spiritual retreat is Rhythmia. And I had the opportunity, it was a blessing actually to be able to go there a number of times as a guest speaker. And what I can say is actually, at least as far as Rhythmia is concerned, the premium price is worth it. Of course, that's not the only place you can go to drink ayahuasca. I know I've heard of, I haven't done them here, but I've heard of people in my area or shamans coming through my area and offering a 2-night ceremony for $1,000 in a special retreat or something like that, And Rhythmia is a couple times more than that. But after having gone to Rhythmia and seen the quality of the experience at such a profound level, and then also the level of care that they put into everything, everything is exceptional, from the farm to table food to the way that the shamans and everybody treats you, and like all the staff knows your name, and it's so human and liberating and real. You know, it's not just like a fancy resort. This is the thing that I think might throw people off, is they might look at a place like Rhythmia and go, ah, it looks like I'm going to some over the top expensive hotel in I don't know, insert like Florida or some like fancy, the Bahamas. There you go. Like I feel like I'm gonna go pay $10,000 to go stay in the Bahamas for a week, or Hawaii, at some premium resort. And what are you going to get out of it other than like relaxation and probably really expensive food and some nice time on the beach? With Rhythmia, it's, from what I understand, it's not even quite that level of the price, but what you're getting is that premium experience plus the most life transforming experience that you've ever had, or at least one of them. And I've been to one other resort that was similar, but not quite on the same level. And I definitely walked away going, this was really nice, but I think I still prefer Rhythmia because of the energy behind it. So it's like, I recommend people have the experience that they're called to have no matter what. But after, and so if that means that they're called to just do private, buy a gram of mushrooms for $10 and take care of themselves on their own, or go out in the woods or whatever and spend a day meditating, or you find a local shaman or go to somewhere and find a cheaper one or find a more expensive one, people will find and seek out what it is that they're wanting. And I think that the profound transformation can come in all of the places. But I don't really have anything bad to say about Rhythmia because I've just experienced so much positivity. And after getting to know the people who work there and getting to know Jerry and what a wonderful soul he is, I just can't. I honestly, I recommend it. Like, it's a good thing to save up for, because everyone's kind of got that thing in their mind, and a lot of people go, oh, well, next year the new iPhone comes out and I'm going to put $1,000 on that. And it's like, well, yeah, okay, but you have last year's model. You don't really need it. And if you were saving up for something, Rhythmia is a really, really, really good investment.
Well, just so everybody knows, this is not sponsored by Rhythmia. That was an authentic. I'm just kidding.
It's
I'm
funny.
joking around. But yeah,
I haven't even been there since COVID. Like when COVID happened, they shut down all of their things, and so I didn't go, and then we never really reconnected after that. So I just, when I think about who I am today and how I became the person that I am today, so much change and growth and healing happened because I went to Rhythmia a couple times. And even the story, like, this is crazy, but like the story of Elixir, it's called Elixir now, like, because the title changed because of my journeys at Rhythmia. And I got so many downloads for the story during those ceremonies. And that planted a seed for the work that I'm doing now. It's actually profound. Like, the elixir in the story is actually a sacred drink that comes from the flower of life that induces a psychedelic ayahuasca-like transcendental experience. And so it was all based on my ayahuasca journeys.
Wow, I'm curious. So what was healed, or what was changed in you from that experience?
Well, okay, on the first trip, I mean, because every trip and every night you're often getting something new, or you're working on something really, important and significant. I'll share maybe two, or at least these are the first two things that come to my mind. It was on the second night of my first trip, because you do 4 nights in a row. I left my body and I time traveled back to the moment of my birth father's funeral. Because for those who don't know, my biological father died a month after I was conceived. So I never met him. And he actually committed, I can't say that, he killed himself, he unalived himself. And because, the internet, they're censoring these subjects, but or those specific phrases. But yeah, he did that. And then I was born into a world without a father, and for the first 4 years of my life didn't have one. And then my mom remarried, and I grew up with a wonderful stepdad. But so in this ceremony, I went back to his funeral, and I saw him, like, as a ghost or as a spirit, pacing up and down the aisle of the church or whatever it was, and he was going like, "What have I done? What have I done? What have I done?" And I saw these footsteps then that kind of went off into space, and so I traveled up, and like I followed the footsteps all the way and found him. I went into this like deep black void, couldn't even see stars, but I found him pressed up against an invisible wall, banging for help. And from what I understood, he had been there. Like this was now, I kind of saw him in that space, and then I jumped forward to the present moment and I saw him where he was now. And he had been in that void space, kind of trapped between dimensions, or trapped, in the passing through phase of regret and pain. And he had been there for 27 years. And I called out to him. I was like, Dad, Dad. And he didn't hear me because he never knew himself by that name. And so I called him by his name, and he looked over and he's like, who are you? And I was like, I'm your son. And I want you to know that I love you and everything is okay. And his eyes like widened and he shattered and he dissolved into the ether, into I guess into actual spirit, or into the passing on. And so over the next, like after that, I came back to my body. And then over the next couple of nights, and then this was a recurring thing that also came up here and there in future ceremonies, was I started to realize and heal this trauma that had been in my body that I didn't even know was there from like pre-birth, like from a month after I was conceived. The trauma and pain that my mom felt from the loss of my father, and the pain that I felt growing up without him, and the change that actually happened on a mental level, on an emotional level, on a biological, on a genetic level in my DNA, was affected in such a way where, my inner masculine energy was shut down. And so I grew up in a very interesting, I was very unique in the world, and maybe I still am a bit, but I mean, I was a very different individual, growing up in school, and didn't have many friends, and the way that I thought about things was very different. And a lot of that came from this like pre-birth trauma, and going to Rhythmia healed that. And then it started to empower me to step into my own, inner sense of divine masculine, of whatever that means. And that was huge. That was profound. And so, yeah, I would get these lessons periodically in these ceremonies, and other times just realizations like, oh, that's why that happened when I was 12, or that's why I got into this trouble when I was 8, or this mess that I made when I was 16, or that relationship that I ruined in high school, all of these things. And it really helped me reconcile my past and be a better man, and also give myself going easy on myself, giving myself some grace, and receiving some grace of knowing, hey, it's actually not all my fault. Yes, I may have ruined that relationship in high school, or acted silly here or there or whatever, but it was essentially programmed into me with this pain that was locked in my subconscious and my unconscious. So that's one example of a healing that I don't think would have happened any other way. And then the other one I actually made a video about on YouTube. Is called The Psychic Attack Anchor That Almost Destroyed Spirit Science. But it was my very last trip to Rhythmia, where I spent 4 nights battling this evil, I called it a psychic attack anchor. It was like this evil force that had essentially infected my body, or I want to say taken over my body, but it was a very dark entity that would give me thoughts about self-sabotage that it would make me think that they were my own. And it was like the drama around the story was really crazy. And I put this in the cartoon, in the video that I made, where it was like, what I received was, it was put in me by the deep state. And I was just working on the conspiracy theory of everything at the time, so maybe that was influenced, but it was put in me to stop me from becoming an ascended master. And it's a funny thought, but then also like the level of battle that I went through. It was like the hardest 4 nights of my life. But after removing that entity or that thing from me, I felt like I had myself back again in a new way, where my trajectory and my pathway seemed clearer, and I seemed to have more control and authority over all of the thoughts that were present within me in order to make the best decision. So that was another really crazy experience. And also, there's a lot of different ways of interpreting that. Because, what is even an ascended master? What does that even mean? And I think that maybe part of me likes the story and the drama of it all because, but also it could be interpreted as just by having gone through that, I really faced the darkest parts of my own shadow self that was, you know, that liked living small or liked being limited or was attached to limited thinking. And to take more responsibility over every little thing that I do was such a massive gift. And it was a huge wake-up call, and my life has never been the same since. So yeah, those are just a couple of little stories that came up. And the cartoon on the attack anchor thing is really fun and funny, and I don't know, for anybody who's curious to watch it, it's on YouTube. But yeah, those are just a few of the things that I experienced at Rhythmia.
Wow, that's very moving. Thank you for sharing.
Wild, yeah.
That's quite a story. And it's amazing what the stories that you hear from people doing ayahuasca. It's almost like they tap into these timelines that didn't play out in this reality, but there's infinite realities, and they get to explore like what happened if this person was still alive. Or I heard this very moving story of this woman who had an abortion that was very traumatic for her, and I think she had multiple, and she ended up meeting her kids that could have been and connecting with them and seeing their whole life play out. Deeply emotional. And yeah, it's I've never done ayahuasca, so I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
The funny thing was I was like this so close to doing it. I actually had communications with Rhythmia. Mm-hmm. This was probably at the peak of my psychedelic exploration phase. And I thought, yeah, I mean, they were really nice. They offered me a trip there in exchange to promote it on After School. And right before I went there, I had a very traumatic psychedelic experience, not at Rhythmia, about a week before. And that was a big shifting experience for me. And I thought after I came out of that, I was like, you know what, take a little break. And I told him, I think I may have gone off the rails a little bit. I'm not up for this trip. Right before the trip was scheduled to happen.
Yeah.
And they were very understanding. They're like, we totally get it. And I was like, I really haven't done too many psychedelics since then. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
I definitely understand that, like, especially having the traumatic experiences, and I've been there, and it's kind of crazy to reconcile and make sense of just what can be experienced with them. And I think there's after going through everything that I've been through in the realm of psychedelics and seeing both, like, I mean, for me, I would say probably 85-90% positive, but sometimes that 10% that can go bad, like half of that is that sucked, but it wasn't the worst thing ever. And then the other 5% is that was the worst thing ever. And it can be really, really intense and jarring. So I understand a little bit where the caution comes from in the collective, like it really, really needs to be done right. And this is what I love about Rhythmia is like, and places like this is that for a true shaman or for a real magical special place. I've read the book. It's called The Fellowship of the River about Nihu Rao, I believe it's called. And that's another place. I think it's in Costa Rica. That's they have some profound stories that come out of there. So when a real shaman or a real place facilitates it properly, just how special it can be. But then, yeah, if you're just kind of going off the rails on your own, or you don't have all the precautions that you need, you don't know exactly what's going to happen every single time, and there is some level of risk there. But what comes to mind on this is how, after everything that I've seen in the realm of psychedelics, it shows me just how anything is possible and how humans are moving into this direction of utterly transcendent. And it's kind of what's really exciting for me. It's what pushed me to work with them quite a lot in the past, because I have seen objects like levitate or teleport around me, both while I'm awake and while I'm sleeping. Yeah, things moving on their own. And I've even experienced some level of timeline jumping where giant structures, literally houses around me, transformed after a psychedelic trip, where I feel like I jumped into a different timeline of Earth's history that I just couldn't explain. It was actually day and night, like living in an environment for over a year, walking the same blocks all the time. And then one day, all of the houses on this one particular block, and then extending here and there a little bit beyond it, were different. And I could not explain that. And I've also heard a story, this actually happened at Rhythmia, of there was a woman who claimed that in her journey, she physically teleported to Sirius, the star system Sirius, and she met the big blue beings there, the Sirians, or whatever we want to call them, and had this profound journey, and then came back and was physically here. And you might think, well, that sounds like maybe she astral projected, except that her friend was watching her in that moment and saw her physically disappear. Like she's walking and here's, there's some trees behind her, and all of a sudden it's just the trees. And then later she shows up again. And it's like, wait a second, what? And it's these kinds of experiences and stories, whether you hear about them or you see them happen in your life, you see them happen enough, you start to go, oh, okay, we really are kind of in a bit of a matrix here. Or there is some level of transcendental possibility that humans are waking up to. And I think we're still a ways off from it. And this is what kind of calmed me down from pursuing it so much, because I was like, oh my gosh, I want to learn how to be a Jedi. I want to, did I just make that object teleport? Can I do it again? What do I have to take? But I got to this point where I went, I don't think that I can be so grounded here and make content and show up and do the work that I feel like I'm here to do if I'm chasing that dragon, which it might be a little bit of a ways off for us at this point in time.
You mentioned something, and I just watched your conspiracy theory of everything. Great, amazing video. I'm like, I can't imagine how much energy went into that. But you said something in there that blew me away. You talked about the 4-minute mile and how for so long people thought it was impossible.
Yeah.
And then suddenly one guy breaks it. And then all of a sudden in the same year, everybody can do it. There was this threshold. Everybody thought it was impossible. And then once we were able to see that it was possible, all these other people were able to do it. These things you're talking about, like teleportation, telepathy, these things that we think are impossible right now because we have this like materialist scientific worldview.
Right.
But when there's undeniable evidence that somebody's doing this, when the whole world is like, oh my God, that guy he jumped like 100 feet in the air. It's undeniable. I feel like that would unlock a lot of these latent powers within us.
Yeah. No, I fully agree. I think there's also a bit of a challenge of the question of do we get there naturally, or do we use these psychedelics? Because the psychedelics seem to amplify that state, but it's also temporary. And when you follow the path of, like, this is why I love Yogananda's work, because Autobiography of a Yogi is just like 40 or 50 chapters of then this amazing miracle happened, and then this amazing miracle happened, and this guy levitated, and this guy created scents out, like, smells, any smell he wanted to out of his hand, and then this guy created 2 bodies and could bilocate, and then this, it's like, it's just that for so long. I want to make an episode of Spirit Science about like the 10 most legendary miracles in Autobiography of a Yogi. But that book, and that story and that lineage, there's no psychedelic practice. It's just deep transcendental meditation for 8 hours a day or more all the time. And I think that locks it in when you're living at that level. The story of Babaji is that he meditated without moving. He left his body for 2 years. His body stayed firm in meditation, and he was out of body in the astral, and his body was just receiving cosmic energy, coming back from his higher self or his traveling body. He stayed in meditation for 2 years. Then when he finally came back to his body, he was a completed, fully realized ascended master being who could levitate, move through walls, he could bilocate, he could raise his body into different dimensions, whatever it was, and that he's been on this planet for a very, very, very long time, which is a fun story about Babaji. But, that level of commitment to do that, it's like he was divinely called, but it may or may not be the case that for all of us, we have some level of sole purpose of what to fulfill here. And we have to make that choice. Do I want to go and tackle the ultimate right now, or do I want to enjoy the the human experience? Because it could be said that the ultimate goal of life is to experience that ultimate, but it also could be said that in the procession of the equinox, this journey that we're on, we've got another 8,000 years of evolution before we're at the apex of the Satya Yuga, or even just entering the Satya Yuga, right? And so there's a question of where do we find the most true soul fulfillment here? And it's difficult, I would say. At the very least, it's one of the hardest things to completely separate yourself from the rest of the world to pursue this path. And the question that I've asked myself is how can I harmonize those things where I can reach the world and talk to the world and still push myself? And that's where the psychedelic thing kind of came in for a while. And I still explore and dabble with it here and there. But it was like, how high and how far can this push me? But then how do I integrate what I've learned back into the world that I can bring it to the world, Because if I'm off meditating or journeying or whatever all the time, then I'm never going to make elixir, and spirit science is going to stop. And I think that there's a lot of value that brings for the collective too. So it's a dance and it's a balance. But I have found that the psychedelics have become, they can be a very valuable tool if used properly. But we also can't forsake all of the effort that it takes in the fullness of life, not just while you're in a journey, but also the eating right, the regular meditation, the reading spiritual books, or communing with other people about mindfulness or things that are meaningful and things that really matter to you, in order to lift up the quality of one's life and the lives of others around you.
Well said. There's so many avenues I want to take this conversation, but I would be remiss if I didn't go down some of the big rabbit holes with the man himself that made the conspiracy theory of everything video.
Oh boy. Okay.
So it seems like we have these two trajectories that we're moving on. The one that you're talking about is this very organic, you tap in through meditation, through like spiritual powers, and you can teleport and you can read minds and you can do anything, potential is unlimited. And then there's this very like dense third dimensional pathway that a lot of people are going down, where they're going to put a brain chip in their head. They're going to try to achieve these same powers through very materialistic synthetic means. Like, and it's almost like, I think about it like mitosis, like two cells splitting. You have the fifth dimensional being splitting from the third dimension. This is like a popular idea in the new age communities, where they talk about, they're going to the fifth dimension, and there's this third dimension that's almost like NPCs that are going to get locked down there. I don't know. I'm curious to get your opinion on like that idea of like the synthetic future versus this, this great awakening versus this great reset kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like the technocracy versus honestly, it looks to me like both, but also that at least, that this was the idea that was purported in that Drunvalo shared, that our pathway, like what he talked about in the Flower of Life books, was our pathway is one where it's so unique in the universe, because some species evolve and it's just technology, and other species evolve and it's the organic ascension, and eventually the whole species goes into the astral, and then the planet kind of goes through its own phases of just whatever life is remaining, and maybe new life arrives or emerges in some way. But this is this weird, very unique pathway for us, where we have the option and maybe potential of both, because of, if the story about the fall of Atlantis is true, we were on the organic path, and then a technological species came and merged with us, and it led to the fall of consciousness, and now we're a big jumble of both, and that's in our DNA and our lineage and our history. And so if that's the case, the enlightenment of both is that we will expand rapidly technologically, and we will expand rapidly organically. And I think it's okay to know that there's time, because in in the grand scheme of things, I really love the learning about the astrology. And in Sri Yukteswar's The Holy Science, he explains that whole Kali Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, Treta, and then Satya Yuga pathway, and that the next 2,000 years for us is a time of more so telepathic development. And then is the development of super abilities for another 2,500 years or something. And then you've got a 3,000-year window. And there's a little bit of a blending period between each of them as well. But the final one is the full realization of divine or God consciousness and the possibility of complete ascension. And then the cycle continues for anyone who's still here. And maybe that'll be all of us. And who knows? Because there's no way to predict what's going to happen. But knowing that, you could even see that the technological ability to put a chip in your head or whatever and to become telepathic with people that way is a pathway of telepathy and rapid growth. Just to play devil's advocate, because some people are going to go say, is Jordan advocating to put a chip in their head? And it's like, not necessarily, because also what's probably going to happen is a bunch of people will get chips in their head, and that will be the first wave. And then it'll be like a little, like a dot that you stick on your head, or, a little headset or a little earring or something that just can like beam. It's like Bluetooth, but for thoughts, that might be a thing that actually gets developed. We don't know. But the thing is, wouldn't it be valuable to be able to have all of the information of the entire world available to you at a thought? It's a good question. Like, I have a giant library of books, and many of them, or at least some of them, I have not read yet, and I want to read them. But wouldn't it be powerful to just go and have the complete download? It would be like being Neo in the Matrix, where what skill do you want to learn? I know it all, right? And that could be very, very, very valuable for the at least information-based enlightenment, and knowing all of that, knowing that all of the information is available and people are downloading the internet into their minds, they would probably also download all of the spiritual texts. And they would start reconciling and making sense of how it all fits together very, very quickly. And then if they did that, then they would probably want to go and meditate. Or they would be downloading the stories of what happens with psychedelics, and they go, oh, I need to go, find some mushrooms or something like that. And, they could end up complementing each other. If it goes to such an extreme, that extreme will probably still send them back, because they'll find out that there's something more that they haven't been experiencing. At the same time, because I have no idea. This is just the way that my mind thinks about it, is to kind of take everything, even no matter how crazy or chaotic it is, and see if there's a positive aspect, or what's the gift hidden inside the garbage. And then the other side of it is that there is so much psychedelic research and spiritual work that is being done on the other side. And it's not super in the mainstream yet. But I imagine that, there's healing centers that are available, that people, like, there's mushroom therapy clinics, there are counselors and psychologists who are actually legally licensed to be able to facilitate psychedelic ceremonies with people. There's like ketamine clinics and stuff that are opening up all over the United States. And I think that there's something there where, if that hits a bit of a critical mass and there's enough stories coming out about that, we might be due for some kind of psychedelic revolution where, a new wave of healing centers do open up, and people start to go and experience these things with less fear and more security of knowing that it's all going to be okay. And if that happens, then those two things, the technological growth and the spiritual growth, could happen hand in hand. And they're already informing each other. I mean, the amount of people in Silicon Valley programming all of our computers, microdosing on LSD every single day, is insane. So anybody who's like on a computer, I mean, we only have this digital interface and else, the first computer screen with the mouse and everything that like Steve Jobs inspired was based on his LSD trips and wanting to bring that experience into a digital medium. So yeah, those things very much inform each other. And the more that we realize that, I think the more that we'll find that the technology path and the organic transcendent path kind of just wrap around each other like DNA. and there's strands and lattices between them.
Good point. I wonder if we already have every book and skill is already within us. It's like Socrates said that all learning is a form of remembering. And, perhaps if you take reincarnation to its limit, you are every person that ever was, ever will be, everyone on earth is your soul. So you were the author of every book on that shelf.
Mm-hmm.
You are the greatest kung fu master. And Carl Jung warned us about be careful of unearned wisdom. And I wonder if you just download everything, I mean, is that information going to stick? Or, I mean, is that really, you got to earn it. Like you have to become the person worthy of receiving that information through the process of that hard work. And just to download it, it's not going to stick and you won't know what it means. You're like, okay, I know how to do kung fu, but what is kung fu? Who's my enemy? It's just.
That's a very, very good point.
Yeah.
It reminds me of a story. I just read about this the other day in an article about de-skilling, which had to do primarily with how in the age of AI taking over, there are people who are losing skills, because everything is a muscle, and if you don't use it, you lose it, as they say. And so as people are relying on AI more, they are forgetting or losing the skills naturally that they would normally use before of how to acquire that information or what the information was. Maybe years ago they had memorized, in growing up in school, maybe people were taught to memorize certain Shakespeare or learn a lot about it. And now they just use AI to find the one specific sentence in Shakespeare that they need for their project, and they don't even know what the meaning of the whole story is. So in this age of de-skilling, though, at least in the article, one of the things that they said was that there's a story of Thoth, ancient Egyptian god of wisdom, giving this ancient king the gift of writing. And the king said, that's a terrible idea, because the moment that we start taking our thoughts and putting them onto paper, we're going to lose the ability to remember all of the thousands of years of oral history that we all collectively remember, because everybody, like, that was their form of mastery, was memory back in the day, because they didn't have writing. And the moment that we start penning things down, now people don't have to remember all of this information. They can just go and reference it in a book. And Socrates in Greece actually agreed with the king and was like, yeah, a bard can chant off all of the knowledge of mankind that has ever been established. And he's got all this information inside of him, and that all of it is going to go away. Yet at the same time, the moment that writing was introduced and it became solidified, now we have more solid and concrete records that are unchanging over time as to what actually went down, because humans are also infallible. And it could be that, yes, maybe that bard had thousands of years of history, but if he got one name wrong, or he added an N instead of an M, or, turned something upside down, or he, our minds are organic. They can shift and change, like the flowing, it's like thinking of a stream or a river or a body of water over thousands of years. That it does change. Rivers do change. I would know. but like, that is a natural thing that happens, and the gift of writing allowed us to evolve, even though we had to give up something in the process of it. It's the same thing with AI and the evolution of technology, and what you said of if you download and become a kung fu master and all of the information, but then what happens if you take that little chip off or if it's like I'm thinking of that one episode of Black Mirror where they went into a VR world and they had a little token on their head or whatever, and it was very cool. But like, if let's say you got this little magnetic thing and it just clicks to your head and you have got the whole internet right there, you take that off, do you forget? And what happens if you have to go a long time without it? Do you become useless? So we have to, I think, and then the point of the article a little bit too, but I generally agree, is that if we are giving up some level of maybe it's our creativity or our skills in, by letting a robot do it for us, or letting the systems of mankind do it for us, then it would be very good for us to increase a counter skill to balance in the world so that we actually become greater versions of ourselves than less than. That's been my stance even with AI and how I use it. It's interesting because when I see how other people are using it, I'm like, I don't get it. Why are you doing that? Just using it to write your book reports in school and stuff like that. But it can be used in a valuable way that can support your growth and the work that you're doing as well. And it really is a balance. Although I'm not sure if that fully answers the question that you asked.
Oh no, that does. It's interesting that every time there is a new innovation, we do lose something.
Yeah.
And oftentimes what we lose is not seen. It's not very obvious until way later. I can go through every invention. I guess the first one that comes to mind is the birth control pill that came out in like the 60s.
Yeah.
We thought, oh my God, this is a huge revolution. Now we can plan our lives. We're not at the mercy of biology or fate or whatever. We're not going to have to do shotgun weddings anymore. And that has kind of torn apart the nuclear family. When pregnancy became a choice, sticking around and being a father became a choice. And you see the rates of fatherlessness skyrocket after that. You see divorce and all these things. And we didn't really know the echo of that until many decades later.
Right.
And so now we're finally figuring out, maybe that was a bit, we lost something that we actually needed. Maybe that struggle was a bit good for keeping some things together. And I guess I'm wondering, we're at this point where people are outsourcing damn near everything, decision making on every level. And like, are we losing more than we're getting in return at this point?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's always, I don't know, I really subscribe to the idea of equivalent exchange, that in the various levels of trade-off, you're moving energy around from place to place. And it is an equal exchange, even if it doesn't look it. But we have to also consider humanity as a whole. If you just look at yourself alone, or your family, you might say, oh, the rich billionaires have taken everything from us and it's not equal, But if you look at the collective whole planet and just how things are moving, and then you factor over thousands of years of time and how the energy moves from hands to, energy, technology, the skills, the knowledge that we gain, all of it, and how that has evolved collectively, there is a natural harmonious dance where, just like what you said with the birth control pill, it seemed like a revolution. And for the time it was, and it still can have benefits today. And at the same time, we've seen now the echo of the negative side of that. And whenever you create anything from the mind, there's always that polarity of direction, right? You're creating something you want in one direction and something you don't want in the other direction. Sometimes it takes a long time for that other energy to come back around and meet you in the face, and you go, oh, that was a bad idea. And so even with the AI, on the one hand, there's all this opportunity for creativity, as well as the opportunity to lose your creativity. There's more access to easy information. There's also more access for distraction. And there's people becoming potentially a lot more shallow because, and superficial. And that's not just because of AI, even ever since the start of the internet and Facebook and the Instagram culture, where people are scrolling like this every day. For the statistic is that they scroll up to the size of the Statue of Liberty every single day. That, like, the average person scrolling like crazy on Facebook, it scrolls that much. Like, that's insane.
Wow.
But so in this age, right, you have access to all the information. The trade-off is shallowness and superficiality. But then also looking at yourself, access to all this information, if you're using it wisely, you can learn anything. You don't have to necessarily go to college or go to university and spend $20,000 becoming having a degree in whatever whatever field it is, unless you really, really, really are attached to the degree, and maybe you need one for the particular field that you're in. But becoming like I went to college for 2 years to become a graphic designer and a video editor and a web designer and a animator, and I learned all of those things, right? And that was 2 years of grueling school, but anyone can learn that on YouTube, you know? The trade-off is you have to watch YouTube ads or pay for YouTube Premium, and there's a time commitment, and that there's a trade-off that you don't get the same level of community. You don't get the class and the teacher and being able to go up to the teacher and say, why am I having this glitch? You've got to figure a lot of other things out on your own. But no matter what, it's always a trade-off. It does come down to how you're using it. So at the end of the day, I think there's a great spiritual teacher that comes from Master Buddha who said, those who continue on with the thinking, they did this, they abused me, they attacked me, they robbed me, suffering does not end. But for those who stop these kinds of thoughts, suffering ends. If we take responsibility for how we're spending our time and being real with ourselves, are we using it wisely? Are we not using it wisely? Are we not just our time, but our focus, our thoughts, our energy, our money, all of it? If we're directing our all of that in a good direction, an intentional and mindful way, and use the resources available to us, then life is but a dream. And otherwise, it can be a living hell if we allow ourselves to stay rooted in just the mundane, and it's easy to be there when you have access to the Instagram feed or TikTok feed.
Do you think we can awaken too much?
What does that mean?
So yeah, glad you pushed for more information on that question. But I wanted to, like when you quote unquote awaken, you tend to see people blissfully in their ignorance and get upset about it. Hey, you're eating, where that food comes from? It's a factory farm. Or you tend to be so aware that you can end up out in the abyss and you got nothing to grab onto. And then you look at people that are just watching a football game and you get isolated. You could get isolated. So I don't know. I'm curious. Sometimes in my own spiritual journey, I've gotten to this end of the road that just never ends, and it kind of just goes off. And I'm like, I'm getting pretty far away from other people now.
Mm-hmm.
What do you have a way to tether yourself so you don't go off too far?
Yeah, so first, that is a wonderful, wonderful point. And I have definitely been there where just going on my own journey, especially such a, when I talked about how I went into low power mode, and during that window of time, I ended up living alone, or mostly alone. There was some just short windows where I was with one other person, but living alone for a very long time, and not just on my own in a neighborhood, but I was up on a mountain or on a lake, sometimes 2 hours from civilization, or at least half an hour drive. I was far away from everyone, and I was by myself. And part of the value of that was that in those spaces, I was able to do some more of the psychedelic journeying that I wanted to be doing, that I felt my soul was calling me to do, because in such a isolated environment, you've got a big empty energy field to work with. Whereas, as I've experienced in a couple of the journeys that I've had now in a local environment with a neighborhood, where I'm like, I think that's the energy of that guy up there. I'm sitting in meditation and I'm being like, oh, I'm seeing the whole collective, everybody around me. This is very interesting, and just feeling and perceiving the collective consciousness in that way. There's a value to the isolation path. That is the renunciant path. That's the path that they talk about a lot in the autobiography of a yogi. And Yogananda's work, Sri Yukteswar, and that whole lineage, and many, many masters. Buddha, became enlightened by doing the same thing. And at the same time, yes, to what you said, the challenge is, if you go down that path and then you try to reintegrate, but you're judging everybody else around you for the path that they're on, then, that immediately is a bit of should be a trigger that you might not be as enlightened as you think you are. because the enlightenment path is one of love. The one of the anchor staple levels on the map of consciousness is love and is peace and is acceptance. So if you're standing in this anger of other people, judging them for their choices, while and being afraid that it's going to ruin the world, then that's fear and anger. That's still that's force instead of power, for at least those familiar with the power versus force model. And true enlightenment comes with peace, love, acceptance. If you can be in a state where you can see other people making their decisions and their choices, and then loving them, gently and lovingly guiding them through your presence, whether you participate with them or not, that is the mark of a true, I think, spiritual master or spiritual warrior who gets it. Because at some level we were all there, and if we are all each other and reflections of each other, then the way that we treat each other is paramount to how we evolve. And it can be said that the Supreme Spirit too, or the Holy Spirit, or the divine consciousness that is present and alive and around all of us at all times, is never sitting there going, you really shouldn't be eating that McDonald's hamburger right now. You're gonna suffer for that. Like, the Spirit is like, no matter what, I love you. Let's move in this direction. Like gentle waves of the ocean, just gently moving us and supporting us, right? And if we can come from that same place, then we become a more clear reflection of that same divine power. So I think that's the first thing that comes to my mind in reflection of what you said is yes, it can be easy to isolate and to become lost and you have nothing to grab onto. But if you're on that isolation path, it shouldn't be for the running away from a world that you're afraid is going to burn and be destroyed. It should be isolating to know yourself better, so that if you do come back into the world, you can better serve it and better support those people in your life. And also knowing that you don't have to spend time. Like, if you do that and come back into the world and you're upset with everybody around you, find other people to spend time with that are a better fit, because there's a lot of people in the world, and we can move farther when we're in harmony with people that we really resonate with, rather than those who we just don't see eye to eye and get along with, and we can still love them, but we don't have to give them all of our time all the time unless they're, actually asking for help.
That's beautifully said. And it resonates on a level of very common stories that we see, hero's journey, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking of like a lot of movie references where you have a hero and a villain both have the same origin story. They're both born out of a traumatic event, but the villain responds in a very different way than the hero. The villain gets resentful and tries to project out onto the world with revenge, where the hero learns and grows and goes on this journey and evolves. And it's funny, usually in these stories, there's a trope of a much older but joyful, wise person, like a Rafiki or like an Uncle Iroh, who's somebody who's been on that journey and is so experienced that they see the journey from a zoomed out lens. And so they're not caught up on like each little part of the story. They're like, we're on this stage again. And it can even suck, that part, but they're like, they know that it's going to come around. And you made me write down this concept, basically, which is about ignorance is bliss. So first you have unconscious incompetence, which is that you have no idea of what you don't know, and you're just blissfully ignorant. Then you have conscious incompetence. You suddenly become aware of that you suck at something. And then you have conscious competence, which is like, then you start to work at it and you become better, but it takes a lot of time and attention. And then the highest level is unconscious competence, where you've like transcended and you can just be on autopilot and do amazing things. And that's when you're like free and wise and cheerful. But it takes a lot of work to get to that level. And so that middle phase is very uncomfortable and painful.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of us like to stay in the unconscious incompetence, the ignorance is bliss phase.
Right. Yeah. It's easier to, well, it seems easier in the short term to do something that is just pleasurable for right now. It's easier to spend a night, 2 hours watching Netflix than 2 hours playing piano, even if you have never played piano before, you know, and just learning a new skill, and no matter what that is, or learning to draw, or learning to whatever, and the difference is the long-term payoff of learning that skill, no matter what it is. If it's something that your soul calls you to, or you're inspired to do, the long-term payoff of that early commitment is that you can move and inspire people so much, down the road. And I just think of, this is something I've always wanted to be able to do. Although it is a musically inclined thing, because I remember when I first started traveling when I was 19 and 20, and I would go to these gatherings, and there'd be like way over, it would be in a big open space, and there's like a little musician DJ tent here, but then there's a bunch of campfires, and there's people going for walks, and there's like people playing chess, and it was just like super low key. It was like a mini festival, but of like 100 people, 150 people at most, maybe. And it was really, really chill. And there was people meditating in this one area, and there was people doing cacao, offering cacao to people and stuff. And I remember going to the campfire and just seeing like 3 or 4 people just like playing guitar on the spot, making up a song, or maybe they all knew the same song. And then some people would be playing, and another guy would come up, be like, "Hey, can I join?" And they just start doing it, and everyone sitting around is just feeling so much warmth. Like there's the warmth from the fire, there's the warmth from the spirit of the people moving through this beautiful music, and everyone's just there, just like, this is so nice. It's so genuine, it's so authentic. There's so much heart energy. And I remember just being in a couple of spaces like that over my life, being like, I wish I could do that. I wish I could just sit down with a group of people, and everyone's just hanging out. And I'm like, don't mind me. I'm just going to sit back here, and I'm just going to play guitar or play a little instrument and bring some energy to the space, And I'm like 10% all right at piano, but I've spent so much time, like when I'm really in my creative, like the joy, I've put in my 10, probably 50,000, maybe 100,000 hours into the art and animation. So I'm like, that's now my comfort zone. I am in the unconscious competence when it comes to the art and animation, and the learning music is like, it's next on my mind, but I'm inching myself into it slowly, because there's so many different instruments that I also want to learn. I'm like, I don't know where to start. But yeah, I mean, I guess to bring it back to the original point and where I started was, it's way easier to just do the easy thing, but the long-term results of it might be, I mean, yes, maybe you have watched every show on Netflix, but can you sit around a campfire and tell people the plot of every show? And how would that be valuable? There's no long-term, or less long-term gain from taking that path and staying in the limited space.
Who knows? Maybe in future generations, they'll be like, wow, they actually watched Netflix with their eyes, and they could tell us what the episodes were like. That's a skill we don't have anymore.
Well, we just downloaded, the whole plot. Or it might even be like you actually live the experience, You might go into a VR alternate reality where your consciousness goes into this, the other world. A little bit like Ready Player One, but maybe more like there's a show called Sword Art Online where they put on a headset and then they wake up in another world. And I think there's a few other shows like that I've heard about, but it might be like that. Future storytelling could be going into another entirely different reality. But the possibilities of what opens up as a result of that technology can also be used for very enlightening, powerful experiences, if that's how we decide to program ourselves. If we because essentially at that point, even TV programs are called programs for a reason, but all of the games, the media, the entertainment that we consume is programming ourselves. So if we're making enlightening programming, then no matter what, we're going to be moving in the right direction.
It's funny how you can go to an experience like you did at that 150 person festival and everybody's just vibing and the energy is great and it lifts your spirit.
Hmm.
And then you come back to the real world under like fluorescent lights and paved roads and it's just kind of like, okay. And then you go see your dad and he's like, you got a job yet? And it just instantly like brings you down to earth.
Yeah. Yeah. I,
But
I I love the Eckhart Tolle line. He says, if you want to know how enlightened you really are, go and spend some time with your parents.
yeah, they'll bring you down to earth fast.
Uh-huh.
One thing I really wanted to ask you about,
Uh-huh.
you fasted for 40 days, right?
Yep.
Um, so I've never come close to that, but I am really curious about fasting, and I'd love to hear like your experience and what benefits or issues you got from it.
It was profound. I mean, it was a very actually I was going to say it was a very isolating journey, and for the most part it was, but I did have some people come and visit me at two times. I had two different friends come and stay with me for a period.
Did you do this in isolation?
Yeah, just here in my apartment basically.
Okay. I
Um
guess you didn't really need to leave because you didn't have to go get food or anything.
no, and I didn't have to do dishes and everything stayed really clean. Um it was a really really profound experience, and I have a video that I made about it, and I guess I'll probably repost that at some point on my personal channel because I'm starting to do more live action stuff there. But I was amazed. I mean, I looked like a Sith Lord by the end of it. My whole face, like everything was just sunk in, and I was just skin and bones. But um, I I can honestly say that after that journey, in the weeks that followed, I never felt more. I mean, it was another one of those like post rhythmia kind of like like experiences where I was just like, wow, like what a change. But when I went through that window, there was a lot of phases where I was just like, I'm just tired. I'm just getting through it, and sometimes more energy, sometimes less energy. And I was still trying to meditate every day. I was still trying to go for walks every day. And most of the time I did. But the real benefit and the transformation came afterwards, and what was, I mean, there was some very interesting things that happened immediately within like 3 days after starting to eat again, and like flushing toxins from my body, almost as if like my body had built up toxins. So I actually, when I started eating again, I felt a little bit sick, partially because I could feel like years of karma that had been built up that was just all of a sudden being purged. And then another part because some of the food that I just came off the fat, which is terrible. Don't do what I did, but
What was the
um
first food that you ate?
well, the first food was like a juice, I think, or no, it was a dairy. I started with milk, and then a friend of mine made me a rice pudding, which is a traditional Indian dish that actually they say that Buddha had when he finished his 40-day fast, was that, or his very long fast. Some say it was 40, some say it was more or less, but he had reached a point where he was trying to fast for enlightenment, and then he wasn't hitting this point and he was about to die. And there's, if you go and look up on Google or image search for like fasting Buddha or skinny Buddha, like it's just, it looks like a skeleton. It's just like ribs wrapped in skin. And but the story was that he some neighbor or like some lady in a hut somewhere saw him in his almost dying state, and she made him a rice pudding, and he broke his fast with that. And then he sat in meditation for a really really long time after that, and he attained enlightenment. And part of the enlightening journey was understanding and receiving the gifts from others. It was like a big part of that for him. And so I had a friend who knowing that I was going through this, was like, I will make you a rice pudding. And so he came over on my 41st day, and I had been sitting on the grass outside, and I had just drank a little bit of milk, anticipating, because rice pudding also has milk and stuff in it. So then he made me that. And the first day was pretty good, but then I was like, oh, I could have chocolate now, and I had some things that weren't like the best for me, but I also tried to have lots of just fresh, organic, and to take it really slow. I didn't have go straight to tons and tons of solid food, but looking back, I was like, I could have spaced that out a couple more days. And I think I was just so excited to eat again that I just went, whatever. And that was a little difficult on me. So I pretty much spent like 3 days sleeping and like feeling this like process of releasing and purging and not vomiting. I mean, just like releasing, and moving food through my body for the first time, I guess. But after that, I felt really, really clear. I felt very, 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 very clear. And I don't know. It's hard to put into words how that affected me, but I definitely, it was one of those defining pivotal moments for me, I think. And I can say honestly, like, I would consider doing it again because there was a part about it that was really fun. But part of that fun, I mean, I would want to recreate the experience, but do it a little bit differently and just do it better. This year, I actually did something similar. I did a 22-day fast, and that also was a bit of like another step. And I considered going even further and doing another 40, but after 22, it felt like going through the major arcana, and I felt a level of completion. So I ended that, and it was also very positive. But as a result of those long ones, my body doesn't like doing fasting as much anymore. So I often have resistance when I'm like, I should fast this weekend. I'm like, but it's the weekend. I don't want to. And then if I get it during the week, I'm like, it's Wednesday. I should fast. I'm like, yeah, but I'm working today, And so there's always there's a bit of resistance that I naturally have built up as a result of doing that too. The body's just like, can we not? We've already done like so much fasting, but there's just so much benefit.
So what was the intention going into it?
The 40-day fast?
Yeah.
I just felt like I needed to do it. It's hard to explain, Part of it I think was because I had been so spiritually focused for so long, and I know that I'm, for whatever reason, it's people look at spirit science and they watch my work and they listen to me talk, and I've heard a lot of people say that I'm either a role model or they look up to me, or and sometimes I feel like I have this level of responsibility with the world to be as clear as I possibly can be and be on it with the information that I'm sharing, and be a living example of wisdom, and not just someone who reads it in a book and regurgitates it online and then has a less noble but also humble lifestyle. I don't want to be arrogant about the position that I'm in, and I don't want to take it for granted, because I know that there are a lot of people who are looking at my work and seeking advice or guidance or insight, and getting value from what I've created. And I have a lot of care for that, and I and a lot of respect for that, and I wanted to make sure that I'm doing my best in the position that I'm in, knowing also that in the past, when I've had these like standards of perfection, for lack of a better word, but like not really, but wanting to be that at that like transcendental level, that I also got myself into trouble by not humbly acknowledging to myself that I'm also human. And so part of that intention, I think, there was a couple things that happened that also like pushed me in that direction, just like personal stuff that I went through, where I was like, I feel like I want to clean myself up after this, but then there was this other part of me that was just like, I want to reach as high and as far as I personally can go in my life, so that I can say, at the very least, I get to the end of my life and I go, I really did my best, and I went the distance to the best of my ability, navigating that duality between the perfect soul and the imperfect body, because that's the struggle that we all have. We are all the perfect soul and the imperfect body, and I wanted to try and harmonize those to the best of my ability. And so I think that's a bit of where that fasting thing came from. And along, in the year after and since, there's been a lot of wonderful lessons too that have been like, it's okay to be human, don't worry so much, and still do your best, don't take for granted the spiritual gifts that you've been given. And that's like a lesson for everybody, I think. But also be okay with the fact that as a human, every day you're going to make mistakes, You're going to go through lessons. You're going to have good days. You're going to have bad days. And it's all a part of the journey together.
Wow, that's beautiful. Was there a point in the 40 days where you're like, I'm going to give up, I'm going to quit? And then like a different voice in your head's like, no, keep going. Like, was there a point of nearly giving up?
Um, Not really. There was, I think, once or twice where I thought, I could, but I had built this up for a long time. I I think it was probably like 2014, 2016, like a long time ago when I was starting to do more research into like learning about Buddhism, learning about the deeper mystical stuff of Christianity, the deeper stuff of, of all these different traditions, and learning about the profound benefits of fasting and the significance of 40 days and the 40-day fast and Moses on the boat, for 40 days. Like that whole thing could be a metaphor even, in the same path, and Buddha fasting for the same amount of time. I was like, you know what? One day I'm going to do that. I just feel like I want to do that one day because that sounds like a big hurdle and I probably would feel amazing afterwards. So I had the thought, but I didn't know when it would happen. And then at the start of last year, also interestingly, like around the time when I was starting to work on Elixir, I I just had this feeling of like it's time. It, you know, this is the window, and here's a date that I'm going to start. And I got the date. It was almost as if I like received it. I didn't just think about it. It came into my mind. And it was actually, I didn't even realize this. This is divine synchronicity or providence, but I was in meditation asking, when should I start? And I think it was like February 11th or something like that. And I thought, okay, great. I only found out like later into the fast that it was actually the first day of Lent and that the 40 days of Lent coincided with the fast. I had no idea that that was taking place. So that felt synchronistic. And so I had built up for 3 months in advance that I was going to do a 40-day fast and it was going to start on this exact date. So I had 3 months of like mentally preparing for that. So by the time that I got to the point, I was fully in and committed, and I had like markers counting the days on my mirror, my bathroom mirror, with like a dry erase marker, as well as like tons of "you can do it, don't give up, you got this," and every day I was like adding new little things to it. So I definitely felt like, yeah, it was difficult. It would have been more difficult to stop, I think. And I think I would have felt really, really bad if I did.
That's incredible. It's very inspiring. I think, now you put the idea in my head. Now I might have to do 41 days or something. I'm just kidding.
Show me up.
Yeah. But you made me think of this idea that Alan Watts talked about that I really like, where he talks about, do we eat to live or do we live to eat? And the people that live to eat are all about pleasure, and they're very much in their bodies, and they're like chasing after sex and these things.
Right.
And then you have the people that eat to live, where all their actions are in service of their soul. And those are like the monks that abstain from tasty food, from sex. And so the analogy Alan Watts says, it's like you're like a wheel, and the monks are like a wheel that's screwed on a bit too tight. It doesn't spin. And most people are like wheels that are way too loose, and they're just wobbling out of control, just chasing after their senses, chasing after their lower urges constantly. So what most people probably need to do is tighten up that wheel a little bit just so it's balanced. But every now and then it's really good to go fully in the other way and just tighten that wheel up and just experience the contrast, because our world is so filled with abundance and things that are just vying for our attention, vying for our senses to like peak them to the max everywhere.
Right.
So you probably reset your brain chemistry, your dopamine, your entire gut biome. Everything was reset, and a reset can be great. It's great.
Definitely. Yeah. There's a line also that Yogananda described where he says that the being in a state of like the true enlightened God consciousness state is akin to having a constant, never ending full body orgasm all the time. Like you're in so much radiant bliss always that it makes the sense pleasures of the material world seem insignificant. And the challenge is that if you've never experienced anything like that before, all you know is the lower sense pleasures of, oh my gosh, how delicious this ice cream is, or how I feel when I eat or have sex or whatever. So you end up just pursuing that and never knowing anything greater. But in order to get that greater, you have to give up some level of semblance of these lower things, at least for a time, so that you can know that, and it does take the commitment. But I think that's where he's kind of going full circle, but like at least temporarily, like this is, I loved how Drunvalo put it, was, the LSD trip was significant for people in the 60s because it blasted them up into their higher centers to know a higher truth. But then when they came back down, they wanted to get back up there naturally. And that's where some of those kinds of things, that's why Rhythmia is only 4 days. It's like you get to know that something greater, but you can bring it back to the world and you have at least some level of contrast between them. But otherwise, like it takes a lot to sit and meditate for a few hours multiple times, in a day or a week, that's the level of what needs to happen, I think, for some people in order to get them to cross that line, that threshold.
Yeah, you've motivated me. I need to tighten up my wheel a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's time to kind of revisit some spiritual practices and go deeper. But Jordan, this has been really awesome conversation. I'm so glad we got to connect again.
Likewise. Yeah, it's been a long time, Mark.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of your channel, and I've really enjoyed watching. It's like I've grown up with your channel, kind of. I think a lot of us have. We've gone on the spiritual journey along with, we've gotten to see your ideas bloom, and it's very inspiring.
Well, thank you very much. And also, likewise back at you. Like, thank you for your work. Your videos, I think your channel has blown past mine in terms of viewership, especially lately. I have not been as active with spirit science lately, and seeing your stuff come up and the material that you share, it's always very, very valuable and enlightening.
Thank you. That means a lot coming from you. And the YouTube landscape is changing quite a bit, but mostly for the worst. But I have faith that it's going to come around. Yeah. The internet is kind of eating itself, and I feel like what's going to be left are the actual people that are there creating. Mm-hmm. And so both our channels, I think, will stand the test of time.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
Well, I can't wait to see Elixir. I'm very excited.
Hey, cool. Yeah, thank you very much. I can't wait to share it. It's going to be great.
All right. Till next time, check out Spirit Science and Elixir.
All right. Thanks, Mark.